Hi, my name is Mia Montanous. I am a freshman at NC State, and I'm here to talk about my internship with RuralWorks with Bharat Forge Aluminum USA this summer. So I have the um, webcam in the corner like this. Wonderful. All right, let's start. So, like I said before, my name is Mia. I am a freshman, so I'm graduating in 2026 in mechanical engineering. I'm doing a minor in graphics communications, and I'm from Cary. So, Bharat is the company that I worked for this summer. They are part of the Kalyani Group, which is a big group in India that makes a bunch of different things. This is specifically the forging department. So they forge aluminum parts for different car manufacturers, and a bunch of the other branches do steel, but this one specifically does aluminum. So I have the core values in the bottom right to read those. I'm sort of just going to go over my projects as I was there. I didn't really work on one big project the entire time. It was more just like a bunch of little, like sort of independent projects that. So I'll go over the highlights, if you will. So I'm going to start out with sort of my brainchild. I'd say this is my biggest project throughout the entire run. I worked on this for the most hours. It's an Excel database I made for, well, I guess it's two databases for inventory while I was there with Excel and VBA. The biggest things are the character-based searching, the automatic reorder sorting, and the duplicate part detection, which is what I have on the slide. Character-based sorting, very self-explanatory. There is a search bar at the top, and you can look for your part without having to control F it. And it's more than just, you have to search up the exact name. You can search up whatever you remember from the part, and it will bring up the parts that most closely resemble that. Very self explanatory. Reorder sorting, if you have in your database your parts remaining and your reorder level, once the parts remaining so you get below the reorder level, you want to be alerted that you need to reorder the part. It's pretty self-explanatory. So I have a refresh or an update button that will look through the entire database and will pull out on a separate sheet all of the parts that need to be reordered, as well as highlighting them in a different color. And then duplicate part detection. This is when with our sort of current database, they use a different, like a website for all of their stuff. Unfortunately, when a lot of the parts got put in, they were either put in by separate people or things got messed up, and some parts were duplicated in the database. And it's hard to look through all those parts and find all the duplicates, especially since not all of them are the exact same name. Okay, so in my database, you can look through both with absolute duplicates. So when the material description is the exact same for both parts, and it will pull both of them from the list and will show you exactly where they are so you can, get rid of them. It will pull when they have the exact same material number. And then another section, the sort button, will pull out the parts that have a similar description, but not exactly the same. So you can look through and see if there's any duplicates that aren't exactly the exact same part description. So this is really useful because you can do it to a certain percent. So usually I would do like 50 or 75%. So it's like 50% of these words are the same as these words, if that makes sense. I put a lot of time into these, and I'm really proud of what I did with them. I really love coding, and so this was definitely a really great learning experience, especially since I haven't done a ton with Excel before with VBA. I think they turned out really well. I'm very proud of the result that I got from this. Next, I worked on this temperature sensor, which was a very short project. I didn't spend very much time on this, but it was just a lot of learning about circuits and stuff like that. So, in the forging department, we have this big shredder. So when you have the part, you have to slice off excess aluminum so it goes into a shredder. And when it goes in there, it's very, very hot. So sometimes the shredder can overheat, and that makes complications if things remelt in the shredder. So I was given this temperature sensor and a analog output, which basically will read the temperature and will try to monitor it. There's like a relay in there that you can set up to the alarm. So my job is basically just to set this up and hand it off to maintenance to get mounted. So I learned a lot about circuits and about current and all that jazz. This is also a project that I spent a ton of time working on. So the initial problem was that there's this big coil of aluminum that will go into a machine. So it's getting fed in there by a motor, right? So sometimes the coil will get stuck on itself and the motor will continue to turn even though the coil isn't moving. So it's destroying the motor, and that's a big issue. So they wanted me to find a way to tell the PLC when the coil is stopped moving before the motor just gets jammed, right? So to preserve the life of the motor. So I ended up coming up with this plan to have, you can kind of see it on the pictures I have. I have brackets on the sides of these little poles that just happen to be there, very convenient. And then you have an axle that slides down onto the brackets that holds a wheel and a sensor. So basically, the wheel rolls on the wire as it's getting fed through the motor, right? And as it turns, the sensor will go through different stages of being on and off. That information will get sent to the PLC, and the PLC will go through code that will time these these different inputs and outputs, right? So if the sensor doesn't give a signal in a certain amount of time, then the PLC will know to turn off the motor because that means the wheel has stopped. If that kind of makes sense. I spent a lot of time on this, probably around 4 weeks maybe. I learned a lot about like sensors and about approaching these kind of things and 3D printing, and about PLCs as well, which is really great. And I think I did good work here. I think that this can be really useful for the company. The next thing I worked on were the OPLs and the SOPs. So if you don't already know, an OPL is a 1 point lesson and an SOP is a standard operating procedure. I specifically worked with the forging department making new OPLs and SOPs for training for new employees. So I basically just spent a bunch of days, I think it was around like 2 weeks maybe, just around the forging department, learning how things worked, looking out, just taking a bunch of pictures. So with a bunch of the equipment, it's usually like, this is too dirty, there might be a problem, this is what you should look out for, and this is how it should look. And with the SOPs, it's basically like replacing something or fixing something or changing the oil on something, basic things like that. So it's a very like, do this and then do this and then do this. I mean, it's like training. So that's that. The last thing I worked on was this shunt sensor jig. So what we're looking at in that middle picture is a shunt head. So on the robots, they have the grippers, right? And there's two positions. It's either open or closed. And there's sensors on the gripper head, which is the shunt, that can tell whether or not it's open or closed. And obviously those are important for maintenance reasons. And the sensors are only kept on there by screws that sort of like are held on by friction, which isn't super reliable, especially since the robot heads are moving around a lot. So they get jostled and you have to go in and fix them. It's kind of a pain. So I was just asked to make a jig. So I 3D printed, well, I modeled and then 3D printed a little stopper that would hold them in place. So even if they got unscrewed a little bit or got jostled, they wouldn't get out of place or, interfere with the forging line. So those would get shipped off to get CNC'd and then put into the line. All right. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I had so much fun in this internship. I learned so much. I'm really grateful that I got this opportunity. I hope you learned something from my presentation, as I learned a lot this summer. So Have a great day.